Welcome to Prime Life. We call it Retirement 2.0. Leave each episode with tips and new ideas to help you navigate retirement in our new age. It's your time. Make it count.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not intended as medical, investment, or financial advice. We do not sponsor or endorse any of the individuals, companies, products, or services featured on this podcast. Any statements or opinions expressed are of the individual who makes them. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Prime Life podcast. We're excited to be here today and excited to kick off our show. Joseph, hello.
Hello, Laura. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. We saw some rain this weekend, like we have in New England for the last, 35 years. It feels that way, but all in all, it's a wonderful Monday. Mary, how are you doing?
I'm doing just ducky to go along with the rain.
Gotta love that. And do you want to do us a favor in kicking off the episode and introducing our host or our guest, please?
Absolutely. So very excited to have Lance Slatton. He's been a healthcare professional for over 18 years in the industry. He's a senior case manager at Enriched Life Home Care Services. He's also the host of a podcast, All Home Care Matters, and there's a good story behind all of that, not only the business, but the podcast. So, Lance, tell us a little bit about yourself and how that's all come together for you.
All right. Well, first, thank you, Laura, Joseph, and Mary for having me today. As you mentioned, our family had started Enriched Life Home Care Services just over 10 years ago. And we're proud that we've been the number one rated company in Michigan for the last 5 of those years. But one of the things that I was most passionate about was community engagement, community education, and just community fun for our seniors. And as we all experienced, as we were creeping closer to COVID and everything getting shut down, we started noticing a lot of our community events, the attendance was down. Then eventually all of the events were canceled. And I happened to discover a podcast one evening and decided we needed to do a podcast for those couple of weeks while we were shut down, which turned into, 2+ years.
So I love that. And we're also big on community. So for those who are not watching the video, over your shoulder, I'm looking at this silver colored YouTube award. Talk to us a little bit about that, because that is a feat in itself to receive one of those. And clearly you've built a very strong community online. So for those who may not be familiar with it, please explain the honorous item over your shoulder.
Well, yeah. So Laura, the funny thing about that is I knew nothing about creator awards or YouTube awards or any awards. And our editor actually, when we had just surpassed around 93,000 subscribers on our channel, started getting really excited, and I couldn't figure out why, because there's billions of people in the world, and I didn't think 90-some thousand was that big of an achievement. And he explained, no, once you hit 100,000, YouTube is going to audit your channel. They're going to authenticate your channel and get you a customized plaque with your name on, like the whole 9 yards. And so then I got excited, and so once we surpassed it, we went through the almost month and a half audit, and then we were able to send in the details for our plaque. And I highly recommend people checking out our Creator Award video, unboxing video, because a lot of my kids are in it and their friends, and we just had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think it goes to show too, right? Across the conversations we've had here on Prime Life, and I'm sure similar ones on your podcast, you really find that this journey of aging and the beauty that comes with it is very much community focused. So it's with family, it is with friends. It's either people that you've known since the beginning of time or those that you're picking up along your journey in the way. So to that, my question would be, as we all kind of rewind in our minds back to the beginning of COVID and the pandemic, and we thought, just like you, it's going to be a few weeks. We'll get through this rather quickly. How did you go about initially building that community, and what did that look like for you as you were trying to navigate the online presence?
So it's going to be a little convoluted answer. I thought it was just going to be a couple of weeks. I actually went home and I was at the track by our house after my kids went to sleep. And I told my wife, I said, I heard a podcast, and I admittedly did not know what a podcast truly was. I always had thought, okay, CNN or whatever your flavor of news is, the podcast is just their programming put into audio format so you can't watch it, you can listen to it. Had no idea. I'm very naive. And my wife, of course, she says, well, what do you know about podcasts? I said, absolutely nothing. So we did a lot of research, though. We didn't just jump into this rather, quickly. And we looked and we saw, okay, we want to do something that's going to provide some value and benefit to the space. Or is it already overcrowded and is there a million people doing the same thing? And we discovered rather quickly, there's a lot of great podcasts out there, a lot of great people doing great work, but a lot of them are all specialized into just one specific niche. And so we wanted to do something that was more all encompassing. We're trying to be the jack of all trades, if you will, not the master of any of them. And so we spent some time doing that. And then I spent several months with a Hall of Fame broadcaster to learn about, audio and all this stuff. And we launched it in May of 2020. And it's just kind of has accelerated since then.
Lance, first and foremost, congrats on that award. I did watch the unboxing video. It was a lot of fun. I know we spoke a few weeks back. Highly recommend it. It's a good time. Talking about community a little bit more, that's an important part of aging, right? Is having a community around you, building, staying active in that in a community, whatever that means. Do you think, having started your own podcast, that this is something that older adults could do on their own to build their own little micro communities to stay connected with people and share their knowledge?
And we'll get that answer after a brief word from our commercial sponsors.
NASA is always working harder to be your carrier of choice. We offer insurance products that can help you meet your retirement goals, such as protecting your savings, securing lifetime income, or paying for healthcare costs. We're dedicated to providing best-in-class service and are keeping things simple, and we'll have your back. We have around 400,000 policyholders and contract holders and have been doing this for a long time, 170 years, but we remain humble enough to always try to improve. For more information, visit nfg.com. Nassau Insurance products are issued by Nassau Life and Annuity Company of Hartford, Connecticut, Nassau Life Insurance Company, East Greenbush, New York, or Nassau Life Insurance Company of Kansas, Overland Park, Kansas. Subsidiaries of Nassau Financial Group. Products are not available in all areas. Policyholder counts are for all Nassau companies as of September 30th, 2022, and are subject to change.
Coverite is the first digital concierge health insurance platform focused on Medicare. Their mission is to make Medicare more transparent and accessible for America's 60 million Medicare beneficiaries. By simplifying a traditionally confusing and complex decision, Coverite delivers a simple, seamless, and hassle-free plan selection and enrollment experience. Try the Coverite platform and see for yourself why they've been referred to as the TurboTax for Medicare. Visit coverite.com/podcast to learn more.
Absolutely. And I think it would be well received. We get requests all the time for topics that we've never even thought about that we then end up planning and start doing some pre-production for. But I think like you said, Joseph, it's a great way for our seniors or even people with disabilities or whatever the situation may be to expand their community. One thing I think, that was very difficult for us as a company, not as a podcast during COVID, was we'd have families reaching out to us, sometimes in tears, sometimes very distraught, saying, I can't go into the nursing home to see my mom, but our staff was able to. And so we're having to give a whole different accounting for our interactions with their loved ones and doing FaceTime because, the loved one wasn't, able to FaceTime or they didn't know how or they didn't have the right type of phone. And this would be such a great way for them to expand that community, stay engaged, even with their own families, that live in other states or, have so many family activities that they can't be going over to grandma or grandpa's like they used to and things like that. I highly recommend it. You can do it on a lower scale where it's very cost effective. You don't have to have all the best and greatest and latest technology. Just a simple USB microphone and a halfway decent laptop, and you're off and running.
So, without divulging your secret sauce, Lance, why do you think your podcast has resonated with people?
Well, I will share my secret sauce. It's not a problem. It's luck. That's plain and simple. I would readily, because this podcast is not our business. This is not how we quote unquote pay the bills. We enjoy doing it. If there is any secret sauce, I think people that do things for the right reasons, the right motivations, and that's something that's very personal and important to them, I think that's really one of the key ingredients to any secret sauce recipe.
Love that. So let's talk about the business, right? Because we've been focused on
Sure.
how you build community, but let's talk about, what is it that the business does? You said that, it's a family business. You've been at it for over 10 years. Talk to us more about that.
Absolutely. So I was en route to medical school, and my father at the time, my parents were divorced, so my father was living on his own, and we got a call, my wife and I, we got a call one evening, and it was actually my wife that received the call. Now, mind you, my father was the alpha male, if you will, Marine Corps in the 60s. Marine Corps today is a lot different than it was in the 60s. And, he was invincible, so to speak. And he had developed a wound, and it was a rather serious wound. We found out after the fact, and it'll be fine. I'm going to put a Band-Aid on it, scrub it down, and I'll be on my way. Well, it was an abscess. And so the abscess actually ended up bursting one day when he was driving his car, and he went to his family doctor and thought the family doctor could heal it and take care of it. Well, he kind of got a little reprimanded and said, you need to go to emergency room right away. This is not something you take care of in the doctor's office. Had surgery and should have been fine and should have been on his way. But again, that alpha male kind of takes over. But part of that too is the location of the wound was very difficult for anybody of any degree of medical background knowledge or, ability to even take care of, because it was on his coccyx. He had slipped and fallen. And my wife gets a call one evening from the home healthcare nurse and says, I have Mr. Slatton here, and I'm seeing him 2-3 times a week to check his wound, change his bandages, but this needs to be done seven days a week, 3 times a day. I'm very concerned. So my wife ends up speaking with my father. I end up speaking with him. We get him to move in with us, not really knowing what we were getting into. And that's nothing against him, but, I'm pursuing higher education. My wife had already graduated, just started her new career, and it was 24/7 that he needed care. I mean, this was not just some small task, some small wound. This was a very serious, aggressive wound. And he ended up having a total of 7-8 surgeries before it was all over with. Very traumatic. And so we had one of the best healthcare systems in the state of Michigan. I won't name any names, go blue. And they never once provided us with resources. And again, I'm not faulting them for that. They have a lane they're staying in, things like that. But, we quickly were becoming very overwhelmed. We're newlyweds. We're trying to get our lives going and things of that nature. And so I went to actually have lunch with a friend of mine one afternoon, and he had an office building down the hall from his office building. It was a home healthcare company that was hiring. Well, at the time, I was doing student support teaching, whatever you want to call it, at the university. I was also working in the labs. And I'm like, you know what? Why don't we start a company where we could send people into a home to help them? I'm thinking, genius. I just invented this great idea, not knowing there's an entire industry out there. And so, again, kind of the same approach we took with the podcast, did a lot of research, learned everything we could about it. And, I wanted to try to help people avoid what we were going through. And that's not to speak, negatively about the situation, but when you're young, early 20s, and all of a sudden you're now tasked with providing 24-hour care for a loved one, not a lot of people, financially can afford to do that. They don't have the bandwidth to do that. And a lot of people don't have the knowledge to do that. I at least had the knowledge that I could properly and, competently take care of his needs. But it just got to the point where his needs continued to progress further and further and further to where there was no other choice, where he now required, IV antibiotics, Q twice a day, things like this that you can't provide in the home. And so, kind of like talking about the secret recipe for the podcast, this was a situation where I'm bringing my personal experience into now my professional life. And so, these families that we meet with, we can at least look at them and say, you know what, we understand what you're going through. Names might be different, dynamics might be different, but the overall, needs are the same. You want the best for your loved one. You want them cared for. And, so we exercise that every time we're helping to support a family and being entrusted with their loved one's care.
So Lance, you mentioned that you do the podcast not for money. It's not generating, you're not paying the bills, as you said. Your business is local, but you've had great success. So I guess it's a two-part question. Is there growth goals in mind? Like you should looking to expand? And, since the podcast is international, I would imagine you have some footprints that you don't even realize out there.
Yeah, well, that's the funny thing, Joseph. So as far as expanding, we're not taking it off the table that one day we wouldn't like to reach outside of Michigan, where we're based out of. Right now, we're covering the bottom half of the state. We have all, quote unquote, all the business that we could want or handle. But we also don't want to lose that personal touch where it just becomes cookie cutter, and I think that really attributes a lot of our success is that it's not cookie cutter where, you have some companies, they're very large, they're everywhere, which is wonderful, and not to say anything negative. But at the same time, if a family doesn't find us first and we're maybe second, sometimes even third, they've had that cookie cutter experience before they reach us. And so we're kind of a breath of fresh air, if you will, after the fact, because it is such a different experience than what they've been accustomed to. So it's kind of a balancing act. Do we want to lose that personalized approach, or, it's I don't know the answer directly, but it's not off the table.
Former small business owner, totally understand what you've said and why. Besides the personalization and obviously you're able to make families feel like, my words, not yours. That all said, what do you believe could be some business that wouldn't cut into that? Because I'm a little bit more interested too in digging a little bit deeper about, beyond the personalization, what things do you do that set your business apart from others?
I can say what my perception is that we do differently without actually being at other companies and knowing all that they do. I can just surmise. I believe the fact that we don't just hire to hire, what I think is one of the big things that set us apart, where, we go sometimes 2-3 rounds of interviews before we hire that one person, because again, we believe that, our staff, because they aren't an MD, they're not a DO, they're not an RN, but to us they are, right? Because when they go into these homes, these facilities, these nursing homes, even hospitals, families hire us for, they are the face and the front of the business, but our case managers, we do regular check-ins weekly with all of our families. And I don't just mean by phone, they will stop by the houses, even small things, just when one of our staff have a birthday, making a huge deal about it, recognizing it, their anniversaries. For our staff that are with us 5 years and up, every 5 years we have these beautiful, our logo is a tree, if you're not familiar with it. And we have a replica of our logo, and it has their name engraved on it. And it's like a crystal tree. And we have people who have been with us for 10 plus years, and they had maybe this is their second career where they retired from a facility after 25, 30 years or 20 years. And, to a person, they all say, this is so refreshing to actually feel and like you're being seen and you're being valued, and you're not just, an errand runner or, the insignificant person because you don't have that higher level of degree. I think that first starts with the staff, really, because, if you go to a restaurant and it's a 5-star Michelin restaurant and the waitress is terrible and, she's bringing you the wrong food, your food gets cold by the time they bring it to you. It doesn't matter what the name of the restaurant is or what its accolades are. You're going to remember that experience with your waiter or waitress. And so I think first it just, it starts with the staff, the quality of the staff, but also you can have the quality, but the staff have to also believe their quality too, because a lot of people in this industry, at least from our experiences, they have felt underappreciated or they've been lied to, or, I would say 8 out of 10 of our employees have all said, well, the last company I was at, and we say, well, don't base your past experiences on us, just like we're not going to base our past experience with an employee who maybe didn't work out on you. Let's all start with a fresh, clean slate. But they feel like they've been taken advantage of or that they've been lied to or manipulated. One family, real quickly, they that we recently just started helping, they had to leave this other company. They said we could not handle it. And what was going on was they would have 3 or 4 employees for several weeks in a row all show up at their house for the same shift. And then I think a lot of these companies, not all of them, but a lot of them, they just throw the staff at the wall and see which one's going to stick instead of having that, that procedure, like I said, 2-3 interviews, hiring that quality over the quantity, and having that confidence that when we say Mary's going to be at Linda's house at, 8 p.m. on Tuesday, Mary's going to be there. So we don't have to send Joseph and Lance and Tom and, whoever else, hoping that one person will eventually show up. I think that's a big factor.
Yeah, as you go through it, it harkens back memories. We had gone through a care journey with my husband's grandparents. And there would be times where the individuals that were hired would show up and they'd fall asleep on the couch, or they wouldn't show up, or the things that they would do or would not do. It was just eye-opening. So I appreciate hearing this as somebody who's gone through this journey, how powerful and important it is to have individuals who are quality. And to your point, it's not about quantity. It's about knowing that the people that you work with are great people. They believe in the work and they're going to be there. So kudos to you, because I know that that cannot be an easy feat to line up a group as strong and as promising as that. So,
right. It's true.
I guess staying on the whole positive side, what are some triumphs you've had so far that you could share with us? And maybe to counteract the triumphs, has there been anything along the way as well that you may not have expected?
Well, one of the triumphs that I think we're most proud of is being named the #1 home care company in Michigan for the last 5 years. And we don't, we're pretty unsuspecting people. We don't need our names out there. We don't, none of that. But we like people to know that we do this for the right reasons. We have the right motives. We've had opportunities where we could have taken advantage of opportunities offered to us for financial gain. But yeah, we want to be able to pay our bills. We want to be able to, support our families. But it's not, financial wasn't a factor first and foremost. It was a way that we truly could, help and make a difference. And so being named the #1 company the last 5 years in a row does mean a lot. And just another example, we, our church that we had attended up until about 4 or 5 years ago, because the pastor stepped down, and he's a wonderful man, but that's another interview for another time. We were given 2 semi-trailers, and all these communities throughout Michigan, and this was before COVID, and they would give us medical equipment, medical supplies. I mean, you name it. And that's because they knew who we were. We weren't going to take a $10,000, power wheelchair or, Stryker hospital bed, put it on eBay or Facebook Marketplace. Even if we're not helping a family, they knew they could call us, and if they needed something, we would have it delivered to them, no questions asked. If it was medical equipment, we would just ask, when you're done, please return it to us so we can get it sanitized and we can help another family with it. a lot of people said, well, we'll rent it from you, we'll buy it from you. And so again, financial motives weren't the driving force. It's really just trying to make a difference. And we just believe, if you do it for the right reasons and you do it the right way, all the other stuff takes care of itself.
Lance, as you were talking about service and how you separate yourselves from the cookie cutter service, it reminded me of a friend of mine who credits the success of his business with just answering the phone, right?
Yeah.
Like just showing up and being there for people. I'd love to ask you, since you've built this business and you've built this podcast, running this podcast, there's been some things that have surprised me and interesting topics that have popped up. What's been the biggest surprise in your journey? Is there a topic or an area?
Now an ad from one of our sponsors. Remember when you could trust the news? Well, then check out Walter. Walter is the free, no-nonsense newsletter for grown-ups that comes to your inbox 3 times a week. From current trends, aging in place, travel, retirement, and everything in between, including a dash of pop culture trivia and throwbacks, Walter is a great way to start your mornings and to stay informed. Oh, and did we mention that it's free? Check us out at thisiswalter.com. Get smart. Get Walter.
Yeah. So for me personally, I think one of the biggest surprising things is, and this isn't necessarily a happy thing, it's how many people are out there just to try to take advantage of uneducated, naive people who are in a position of crisis. One thing comes to mind. We recently had somebody, I think I shared this with you and Mary when we spoke previously. They wanted to come and advertise on the show and be interviewed and offered us a substantial amount of money to do so. And when we researched it and looked it up, they were selling the cure to Alzheimer's. And, it's just, it breaks my heart because my grandmother went through dementia. We have countless families we help who are dealing with it. And how somebody could really position themselves to promote and sell a product that absolutely has no merit is beyond me. That's just one example. That's the thing that really upsets me, is just how much bad fake news, if you will, information is out there that preys on these people's, horrible circumstances and their, crisis in their time of life. And it's just very unfortunate.
That's actually a perfect segue to a question I was thinking about, which is, if you're going through a situation like you did with your dad, that you shared that heartfelt story, and thank you for sharing that, because that's so personal. What do you suggest, or what are some tips you could give to individuals? Because you're absolutely right. We've had guests on that talk about, scams and frauds and all kinds of things, especially against the senior population, which continues to grow exponentially. So again, someone is, at a crossroads, they're experiencing a crisis with a loved one, with a family member. Like, what kind of advice can you give to help people sort of take one bite at a time of the big elephant that seems to be so looming and so scary as well?
Well, first thing I would recommend would be, don't be intimidated by the doctors. Oftentimes we hear from families, they get that diagnosis and the doctor has to leave the room or move on to the next patient. Don't be intimidated. 99.9% of all your doctors, they are going to be happy to answer your questions, but you have to ask them first to give them the opportunity to ask it. Get all of your facts and then start deciding what is the safest and best way to take care of whoever the loved one is going forward. Get those resources, ask those questions. And if it's, children taking care of an adult parent and you have siblings, get them all on the same page. That is a lot easier said than done most often. Have the information about mom or dad on paper from the doctor's office, so that, often we have relatives who live in another state. The one sibling lives locally. They're the ones kind of boots on the ground, if you will, and they get a lot of pushback. One story I'll share real quickly. We had a wonderful lady here that we were taking care of, and we kept telling her daughter, who was local, mom needs more help. You need to get this checked out. All these different scenarios. Well, brother, who was the power of attorney and made all the decisions, lives in another state. And so she's trying to tell brother, hey, I need your support here. This is what's going on with mom. Well, brother would call mom middle of the day. Hi, mom, how's it going? Mom, everything's wonderful. Very superficial conversation, but he's hearing all positive and had no concerns about his conversation with his mother. Well, our staff was at the house one day, and all of a sudden the treasurer's office comes and, plasters the door with basically tax lien. If you don't pay these taxes in so many days, the property is going to be auctioned off at the assessor's office. So the staff call us, we call the daughter runs over there. Well, mom hadn't paid her property taxes in several years, and now she's on the verge of having the property completely taken from her. Brother, who handles all of mom's affairs and having these superficial phone calls, had no indication or warning that anything was wrong with mom. She ends up getting diagnosed with very progressive dementia. And, the daughter was upset with herself because she didn't feel like she was as aggressive as she should be. But again, that's one of the difficult things about dementia. It's not a seen illness. If you look at the person, they can look great. You can have a very frequent but superficial phone calls with them. You may not get the warnings. It's once you get below that surface. And so, getting your siblings on board or whoever your support system is going to be, starting with having paperwork, from the doctor's visits or, the diagnosis, because unless they see it, they may go through the same thing that this family went through, where the brother just has a phone call and thinks mom's fine until something very serious happens.
Yeah, that's great advice. And thank you, because people, I think, just to generalize, especially when receiving a diagnosis for a loved one, I'd imagine the world just stops turning. And then it's like, what do you do? Where do you go? But to your point, ask the questions, learn as much as you can, have these conversations, engage with the support system. And identifying support system and defining support system has been something that has case. And it's fascinating to hear about how people engage and disengage and what, may, how the holidays with the families may look different after this in some cases, but it's been an important piece of the conversation. So thank you for sharing that. And as we work to wrap up at the top of the time here, I'm just going to ask Joseph and Mary to share any last thoughts or questions they may have for Lance. Joseph, let's kick to you.
I just recommend that all the listeners check out his podcast, especially that unboxing. He's got some great information, a lot of fun.
I would just say, I love that you have a company, you're running a company and a podcast, and people feel like, again, you're an extension of family, that you really do care, that you have an enormous amount of empathy. And, that is huge. And it sounds like you treat others the way you would want to be treated, you and your staff, and you train them that way, or you train, but also you look to hire with certain qualities, compassion, empathy. I could go on. And so I commend you for that. And that's so wonderful. And, hopefully more individuals will have access to a company like yours as you continue to grow.
Thank you.
So as we wrap up here, I'd love to ask, Lance, what is your why? You wake up every day and you do this important work and you work with people in this industry, and it's not for the faint of heart. I think it takes a lot of heart. So what is your why?
Oh, I love this question, Laura. I'm going to answer it this way. It was the quote I had on my college signature my entire time in college, and it's attributed to Bobby Kennedy. But it actually comes from the Bible, and it's, some men look at things the way they are and ask why. I look at things that aren't and ask why not.
Powerful. And for the listeners who are going to want to learn more about you, your podcast, your business, check out the unboxing video that is just so much fun. What are the best ways they can access your content and then reach out to you?
They can visit our podcast website, which is allhomecarematters.com. Same with our YouTube channel, allhomecarematters.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to answer any questions, or they can send us an email at contact@allhomecarematters.com.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for a great episode. We really appreciate you spending your time and your talent and your treasure with us. So we appreciate you, Lance, and we look forward to another episode of the Prime Life podcast. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Remember to subscribe to the Prime Life podcast anywhere you find podcasts. You can find all of our episodes, contact information, and more on our website, primelifepodcast.com. Stay connected with us. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.